Not even when I pulled 60-hour weeks just to keep us afloat. My daughter, Amelia, used to tell me, "You make it feel like tradition means something. It's not Sunday without you, Mom." I remember her whispering that over a birthday candle, her eyes bright with hope. I carried that memory around like armor, longer than I probably should have. That particular evening, the sky was washed in that gentle gray blue of early dusk, the kind that makes you want to linger outside just a few more minutes. The road to Maplewood was quiet as I drove, both hands steady on the wheel. The air inside, my car filled with the smell of garlic and tomato sauce, spreading slow and warm like comfort. In the passenger seat sat the lasagna I'd made for Amelia, still warm, wrapped in foil, browned on top just the way she liked it. No ricotta, extra mozzarella, basil tucked between the layers. I'd made it from scratch that morning. My back had started aching halfway through, but I didn't stop because that's what mothers do. Their porch light was already on when I pulled up. That soft yellow glow reminded me of the old days when Amelia would leave the hallway light burning for me if I had to work late. I parked behind Ryan's big black SUV, careful to avoid the cracked section of the curb, a habit I never shook. The front steps creaked under my weight as I climbed them. The third step was always a little crooked, but I knew every inch of that house, even if it hadn't belonged to me for more than a decade. I reached out for the screen door, smiling already. But then I heard it clear as if I was in the room with them. "Don't worry, we'll have my mom cover it. She always does." It was Amelia's voice, calm and dismissive, as if she was talking about a grocery run or the weather. Then there was laughter, not hers, but unmistakable Helen Drummond, her mother-in-law. "She's still paying your phone bill, right?" Helen asked, her voice sharp and almost gleeful. Amelia laughed. "You know, Mom, guilt gets her every time." She say yes before I even finish my sentence? I froze, my hand hovering just above the door handle. The lasagna grew heavier in my arms, the foil starting to crumple under my grip. Inside, I heard the sound of glass clinking, paper shuffling. Ryan started talking about the tax office, saying they had until the end of the quarter. Amelia replied, "We just need to show good faith. We could start with a story, maybe say the roof's leaking." She offered before I even have to ask. Helen chimed in again, "Your mom's always been too soft." Bless her heart. The warmth left my body, first from my fingers, then my arms, then somewhere deep in my chest behind my ribs. I felt cold and invisible. I didn't move. I just stood there listening as my daughter kept talking like I was already in her pocket. Like my love was just a line on her budget. I didn't knock. I didn't even lift my hand. I backed away one step at a time, careful not to let the third stair creak under my weight. The lasagna still in my arms, still warm. But now it felt like I was carrying stone. When I reached the sidewalk, I didn't look back at the house. I climbed into my car and placed the dish gently on the passenger seat as if it was still meant for someone I loved. My phone buzzed in the queue folder, Amelia, I was sure, but I didn't check. I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember when I'd stopped being her mother and become her ATM. The street lamps flickered on, casting the road in that old, tired orange. I typed out a quick text. "Sorry, got called. Into work, last-minute review. I'll make it up to you next week." There was no guilt in the lie, only a quiet kind of relief. I didn't wait for a response before I pulled away from the curb and merged onto the highway. The car filled up with the scent of garlic and tomato, the kind that clings to your skin and your memory. I had made the same dish for her 8th grade graduation, the one where she cried because her best friend was moving away. I made it the night before she left for college, slipping a handwritten note into her suitcase that she didn't mention. Until years later. I made it when she came back from her honeymoon, looking tired in a way I couldn't understand then. There was a time when I would have given anything just to see her smile, and I did. I sold my wedding jewelry, gold bangles. From my grandmother, the earrings Greg gave me the year we bought our first house, so she wouldn't graduate with any debt. When Ryan's family said they could only afford a small reception, I covered the shortfall, wrote the check without thinking. When they needed help for their first down payment, I emptied my bonus from the firm every cent because I wanted her to have a good start. I called it love. No one corrected me. They never said thank you, but I thought that was all right. You don't raise a child for thank yous. You do it because you believe in who they're becoming. I took a slow turn onto my street, the quiet rows of townhouses rising like silhouettes on either side. My apartment lights were off. I left them that way. I parked, grabbed my keys, and left the lasagna behind in the car. Inside, I stood in the dark for a long while, coat still on, shoes still. Damp from the rain. I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling everything that had been taken from me and realizing how long I'd been giving it away. At some point, I opened the fridge, not for food, just for something to do. The silence was heavy. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and whispered into the dark, "When did my love become their entitlement?" But I didn't cry. That surprised me. I went to bed with the lights off and the lasagna still sitting in the car. My hands felt cold. My shoulders ached. But there were no tears, just the quiet hum of something finally clicking into place. I stared up at the ceiling, following the outline of streetlights as they moved across the wall. And I thought not about betrayal or heartbreak, but about access stopped by sunrise. I had my laptop open. I logged into every account checking, savings, retirement, brokerage. Amelia's name was still there, tucked quietly into emergency contact forms. As a secondary beneficiary and boxes I'd checked long ago out of habit, not caution. I unchecked everyone. I moved every cent into new banks, opened fresh accounts with long passwords even I'd have trouble remembering. I set up two-factor authentication, changed the answers to every security question I hadn't updated since before Amelia graduated high school. I called my credit card company, my bank, my insurance provider one by one, putting fraud alerts on everything. I deleted the shared Dropbox folder where I'd once uploaded our family budget, the emergency contact sheet, the passwords for the joint Netflix and Costco accounts. I wiped her from my digital world, not out of anger. For the first time, I realized how dangerous I'd allowed my trust to become. That afternoon, I stood outside Meredith's office. She was typing, her glasses low on her nose, her blazer sharp and crisp. Meredith had always been steady in a storm. When she noticed me, she didn't say anything, just gestured for me to come in. I closed the door softly behind me and sat down. My voice was steady, practiced, but I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "This isn't legal, not yet," I said quietly. "But it might turn into that." Meredith stopped typing. She turned her chair to face me, folding her arms. Her face unreadable but patient dots, so I told her everything. I told her about that night on Amelia's porch. How I stood there with lasagna growing cold in my arms, listening to my own child plot my kindness like a strategy. I told her about the money, every gift, every check, every time I made sure they had what they needed before I ever thought of myself. I told her how I had quietly erased Amelia from my digital life, not with anger but with a kind of tired mercy. The sort you give to someone who's proven they'll never choose you if there's an easier option. Meredith didn't flinch. She just listened, hands clasped together. When I finished, she nodded. "You've always been smarter than you let on," she said. I didn't answer. "There's an opening in Seattle," she added. "Regional finance. Coordinator, the work's the same, the pay's higher. Most important, you wouldn't have to share a zip code." I blinked. The thought of leaving all of this behind, of leaving everything that hurt, felt both terrifying and like a chance to finally breathe. They'll cover the move too. Apartment assistants, the works. They need someone who's solid, reliable, someone invisible but essential, like you. I sat there quiet as the reality started to settle in. "You'd have to decide fast." Meredith continued. "But I don't think staying here is doing you any favors." There was no threat in her voice, just honesty. I nodded slowly. My mind was already starting to pack, but not sweaters or books or kitchen utensils. It was the pieces of myself I'd left behind in too many kitchens, too many forgiving texts. Too many moments with a daughter who knew exactly how to hurt me and never hesitated when it benefited her. That night, I transferred the last account. The one I opened the day Amelia was born, back when everything I owned felt like it had her name on it somewhere. I closed it with a few clicks, watched the screen go blank, and in the silence, I wondered what it meant to be a mother with nothing left to give. The next evening, my phone rang. Amelia's name on the screen, bright and cheerful, as if nothing had changed. Her voice was polished, just a little too eager-like when she used to ask for movie tickets or a ride to a party. "Hi, Mom, I was thinking maybe we could get dinner. Tomorrow night, just us. Catch up a little." I let the silence stretch before I answered. "I can't," I said, my voice steady. "I have something more important than family tomorrow." There was a pause. Just a breath, but I heard the shift in her voice. Oh, she said, too lightly. Well, maybe later this week? There's just some stuff we should talk about, nothing urgent. Just plans. Plans, I repeated the word back. To her, not as a question, but as a warning. She laughed, a nervous flutter. You know, taxes are coming up. Ryan's sorting out the quarterly reports. We'd appreciate your advice. I listened. I let her fold a request into soft tones the way she always had, so I'd feel guilty for saying no, but I didn't soften. You said I'd melt when. You cried, I said. Try me. Silence. Not shocked, just calculating. I knew that sound. It was the sound of Amelia rewiring her strategy, already working on another way to get what she wanted. I don't know what you're talking about, she said finally. You do, I replied. You just never thought I'd hear it. She tried again, this time with the performance of innocence. Mom, that's not fair. You're acting. Like I don't care about you, like I'm using you. You are, I said, calm but final. And you've been for years. You told Helen I'd cover it. You said it like I was in a TM with a casserole. She gasped, but I heard no denial. Just a week, you're twisting things. I ended the call. I set my phone down, hand shaking, but I felt lighter. Stronger. For once, I hadn't apologized for seeing the truth. 15 minutes later, Helen called. I let it ring twice before I answered. Claire, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Amelia's just under so much pressure lately. Weddings, mortgage, taxes. It's a lot for them. I'm not confused, I answered, my voice even. Well, she sighed, her tone turning cold and patronizing. This is just what families do. We help each other. You've always been. The reliable one. I think that's beautiful. My jaw tightened. I'm not your bank, I said. I'm her mother. She stopped being my daughter the day she started planning my generosity behind my back. Helen tried to answer, but I'd already ended the call. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I just sat by the window, staring at my own reflection dissolving into the dark. Something inside me had finally gone still. Something that had always bent until it snapped without a sound. This time, I heard the break. The next morning at work, the receptionist handed me a thick envelope. It was the kind of envelope that felt wrong in my hands, unmarked, heavy, like a warning. He said it was personal, wouldn't leave until you signed, she whispered. I took it to my desk, shut the door, and opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a stack of formal legal documents, 12-point font, official language. Signatures I recognized all too well. Amelia and Ryan were suing me. Every dollar I'd given over the year's college tuition, wedding gifts, emergency transfers was listed as a loan made with an expectation of repayment. They claimed abandonment, emotional distress, financial sabotage. There was even a line. That said, my sudden withdrawal of familial support had destabilized their household income. For a moment, I could only laugh, the kind of laugh that slips out when your heart is too stunned to break. I laughed until the tears threatened. But then I swallowed them down and stood up straighter. I brought the documents straight to Meredith. She scanned them quickly, her face unreadable except for a small twitch at the corner of her mouth. When she finished, she set them down with a careful hand, exhaling through her nose like she seen this exact thing 100 times before. I know someone who can help, she said. Her name's Gwen Carraway. She's not cheap, but she's the one you want if you need things clean and final. I nodded, my breath shaky. Meredith made the call while I sat there staring at the envelope, my heart thumping so loud I could barely think. That afternoon, I met Gwen in her office downtown. She was lean, her hair tied back in a way that made her look unbothered by anything. Her eyes were sharp and clear, her voice matter-of-fact. She let me talk first, and I told her everything, every gift, every dinner, every secret resentment that had grown between my daughter and me like a wall neither of us wanted to see. I described the lasagna night, the overheard conversation, the calls that followed. When I was done, Gwen tapped the envelope on her desk once, crisp and sure. They don't want your money, she said quietly. They want to control the story. I blinked, feeling the truth land in my chest like a cold stone. This isn't about debt. It's about guilt. They're trying to force you back into the role you've always played, the bottomless, generous mother, always reliable, always saying yes. I looked at my hands and shook my head. What do we do? I asked. We defend you. They have. No written contracts, no loan documents. You're protected. If you wanted, we could countersue for harassment or emotional distress. I shook my head before she could finish. I don't want revenge. I just want peace, a clean break. Number. Forwarding address. Gwen nodded once, understanding immediately. Then we'll make this disappear quietly and thoroughly. And you'll never have to see them in a courtroom. She prepared the documents, explained every step so clearly I could barely believe. How simple it sounded. By the time I left her office, I was holding a stack of papers that felt lighter than the guilt I carried for years. I walked out into the cold afternoon with a strange sense of clarity, almost like I was waking up after a long fever. They hadn't just tried to guilt me back into my old role. They wanted to rewrite the story, make me look like the villain. In the very same tale I'd built out of love and sacrifice. That night, I went home and pulled every old photo album off my shelf. I gathered the birthday cards, the letters in Amelia's neat handwriting, the notes she used to leave on my pillow. I packed them all carefully in a box, not to throw away, but to remove from sight. I didn't need reminders of the part they'd cast me in. I was learning how to live without the script. Packing for Seattle felt nothing like any move I'd ever made. There was no checklist, no anxiety about forgetting a favorite mug or losing an old scarf. I wasn't moving to start over. Not really. I was moving so I could stop carrying things that never fit me in the first place. I started in the hallway closet, sorting through old linens and holiday candles, tossing out gift bags I'd saved just in case. Some things I kept, most I didn't. The guest room was next, though no guests had slept there in over a year. The bed was still made with the quilt Amelia and I picked out on a whim, back when we used to go for long Saturday drives just for the sake of being together. I folded it quietly, no ceremony dot in a box beneath the bed. I found a stack of unopened cards, all addressed in my handwriting. Birthday and holiday cards I'd sent after Amelia and Ryan bought their new house. Envelopes sealed so tightly it looked like they'd never even been touched. I sat on the floor with them in my lap for a long time, reading nothing, just feeling. The weight of all the effort that had gone nowhere by late afternoon, the kitchen was all that was left. I worked through the cabinets, wiping down shelves, throwing out spices I never used. Then I saw it, my old glass lasagna dish tucked behind a roasting pan. The same one I carried to Amelia's house that night, still clean, never used since. I picked it up, ran my fingers along the edge, and felt the memory push back at me, heavy as stone. All the dinners I'd made with hope. All the nights I believed love was something you could cook and serve up with a smile. I didn't cry. I didn't even hesitate. I dropped the pan in the trash. There was no anger in it, only relief. I closed the lid gently, as if sealing up the past. Halfway through taping a box shut, my phone buzzed on the counter. The message was from Amelia. I didn't need to read the number to know. I'm sorry. We needed help, but I know we didn't deserve it this way. I stood there, reading her words, searching for something real in them. There was no apology for the years, only a small surrender. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. It just felt small. I typed slowly, each word clear. I hope one day you become the kind of daughter I used to believe in. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned off my phone and slipped it into the pocket of a coat I wouldn't be taking with me. The apartment felt lighter, like the walls were finally breathing after years of holding their breath. I picked up another box and kept going, feeling lighter with every step, ready for the first time in years to see what the next day might bring. The apartment in Seattle was small but full of light, with tall windows that looked out over the river and boats drifting along the current. I chose it because it was new, untouched by memory. There was no history here, no echoes of family dinners. No walls heavy with old arguments, no kitchen holding the ghosts of unspoken gratitude. It was just clean walls, wide morning sunlight, and the steady hush of the river outside. I took my time furnishing it. There was no rush. I bought a soft couch in a gentle gray, a single armchair for reading by the window, a little side table for my mug of tea. I didn't bother with a dining table. I didn't need one. On Sundays, I still cooked, but the meals were small enough. For one, enough to fill the kitchen with the smell of basil and garlic without any expectation that someone would appear, hungry and expectant at the door. I didn't miss the big meals. I missed the meaning I had once tied to them, but even that feeling was starting to fade, like fog burning off a river in late morning sun. I found myself joining a book club at the little bookstore on the corner. Not because I needed structure, but because I wanted to hear people talk about stories that weren't mine. The women there were lively and kind, with sharp senses of humor and the ease of people who had nothing left to prove. Janice, with her quick laugh, convinced me to try paddle boarding one Saturday. I fell off the board twice and laughed so hard my cheeks ached. For the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to let myself enjoy the clumsy, unguarded moments. Instead of trying to control everything around me. Most mornings, I walked along the river before work. My new job let me work remotely. For the first few months while the team adjusted to the new schedule. Meredith checked in from time to time, her emails always brief but caring. "You sound lighter," she wrote once, and she was right. I was. I found myself looking forward, not back. Then one morning I got an email from Gwen. It was short and to the point. Ryan indicted. Amelia and Helen under formal investigation. Financial misrepresentation tied to multiple accounts. Your case. Dropped, no response filed. It's over. I read the lines twice, my breath catching somewhere between relief and disbelief. Then I deleted the message without replying. There was no satisfaction in it, just a kind of piece of space where anxiety used to live. Like someone had finally cracked open a window in a room I didn't even realize was suffocating me. That afternoon, I walked down to the bank and closed the last account I kept from my old life. The woman behind the desk was young, smiling, her fingers tapping lightly on the keyboard. She asked if I wanted to open a new account. I nodded. She handed me a form and a pen, and I paused. Name on account. I took a slow breath, and then I wrote it. C.M. Rivers, my mother's maiden name, the name of a woman who had raised me with tough hands and a quiet, stubborn kind of love. The name no one had tried to take from me, the name that was still mine. Tyler glanced at the paper, smiled, and slid the forms back across the counter. Welcome to your new start, she said. I left the bank feeling both lighter and heavier, the weight of possibility sitting next to me like a passenger on the bus ride home. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the last rays of sunlight flicker gold across the water. I thought about the word mother and how long I had wrapped myself up in it like it was a shield. How hard it had been to let it mean anything but sacrifice. I realized I hadn't stopped being a mother, I had just stopped being theirs. Some people only love you as long as you say yes, as long as you keep feeding the story they want you to play. That isn't love, that's leverage. In the silence that followed, I realized I didn't miss the sound of their voices at all. I missed the version of me that used to believe love was enough, even when no one else did. Sometimes when I walked along the water, I'd see mothers and daughters together, and a part of me would ache with old longing. But mostly, I felt something different now, a sense of forgiveness for myself and a kind of hope that felt brand new. I could feel my life shifting, settling into something quieter but so much stronger than before. One Sunday, as I was carrying groceries up the stairs to my apartment, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but old habits die hard. It was a message from Janice. Brunch at my place next week. I'll teach you to make crepes. I smiled, thinking of all the Sundays I'd spent trying to make someone else's favorite meal and how this time it was just for fun. I replied, I'll bring the strawberries. The next day, while I worked by the window, the city bustling in the background, I realized how much I had given away over the years, how much I'd handed out without ever counting the cost. And for the first time, I was grateful for everything I'd learned in the letting go. Spring in Seattle was soft and restless. I woke most mornings to the sound of rain pattering against my windows. The river outside misted and blurred. I'd wrap my hands around a mug of coffee and watch the city wake up, ferries crossing, joggers braving the drizzle, the skyline gray but alive. I liked the rhythm of these days, the way my life finally fit within the space of my own choosing. I learned the names of the neighbors in my building. There was a retired teacher who always carried fresh flowers, a shy grad student with paint on her sleeves, an older man who whistled old jazz tunes when he checked his mail. These small connections felt gentle, nothing like the complicated obligations I had left behind. Work was steady. I handled numbers, balanced books, caught small mistakes before they grew large. I found a quiet pride in it and being invisible, but necessary. I never told anyone about my old life, about the daughter who had turned my love into a ledger. Sometimes, in quiet moments, my phone would buzz with messages from unknown numbers. I deleted them all and read. I knew their shape even without the words, one more request, one more just this once. On a rainy Thursday, I got a letter in my mailbox with no return address. The handwriting was unmistakable Amelia's, careful and round, just like when she was little and learning to write her name. My hand shook as I opened it, not with fear but with something closer to fatigue. The letter was brief. She wrote, "Mom, I hope you're safe. I hope you're happy. I'm sorry for what happened. I wish things could be different, but I understand. If you can't forgive me, I just wanted you to know I think about you every day." I folded the letter and set it on the kitchen counter. There were no tears, just a tired understanding that some wounds don't close. They just become part of your skin. I didn't write back. I wasn't sure what I could say that wouldn't reopen the ache inside both of us. I saw Gwen at a coffee shop a few days later. She was waiting in line, reading something on her phone. When she spotted me, she nodded. "You settling in?" she asked. I smiled, small but real. "I think so." Gwen looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You know, you did something. Most people never manage. You drew the line. You chose yourself." Her words settled over me like a blanket. "I had to," I said softly. "Otherwise, there wouldn't have been anything left." That night, I sat at my window watching the city lights twinkle, thinking about all the ways I tried to buy love with casseroles and checks, believing that if I just gave a little more, someone would finally see me, finally want me for me. But the truth was simpler and sharper. Some people don't know how to love without conditions. Some people only know how to take. I thought about my mother, the real CM Rivers, and the strength she carried in her silence. I wondered what she'd say if she saw me now, alone but not lonely, finally drawing breath without the weight of expectation on my chest. I whispered a thank you to her, hoping it reached wherever she was. I began. New routines. I spent quiet Saturdays in the park with a novel, laughing with strangers at the bookstore, letting the city fill up the empty places I used to try to fix with food and apologies. I started learning Italian on my phone, just because it was something no one else needed from me. For the first time in decades, my life felt like it belonged to me. One evening, the sky cleared and I took a walk by the river. The air was fresh, sweet with rain, and I watched the boats glide by in the fading light. I didn't think of Amelia or Ryan or Helen. I didn't rehearse old arguments or wish for different endings. I just walked, feeling the steady beat of my heart, the weight of freedom in my steps. As I turned toward home, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Janice sending a photo of her dog wearing a ridiculous sun hat. I laughed, the sound bouncing up into the open air, surprised at how easy it felt to let joy in. The city didn't care about my past. It just kept moving forward, and for once I was moving with it. That night, as I settled into bed, I realized I was no longer keeping score, no longer measuring my worth by what I gave, who needed me, or what anyone expected. I had finally learned how to give to myself. I closed my eyes and let the quiet hold me, knowing that in the morning the river would be there, the city would wake up, and I would greet it on my own terms. Months passed, and with each week, the shadows of my old life grew softer, less intrusive. There were still moments, a particular scent or a melody on the radio, when memory tugged at me, reminding me of old traditions and the echo of Amelia's laughter in the kitchen. But I no longer felt the sting, only a distant ache. I finally learned to separate longing from regret. The world in Seattle felt bigger and gentler at the same time. There were bookstores and tiny art galleries and rain-soaked markets where I wandered alone, picking out flowers and fresh bread just for myself. On weekends, I'd take the ferry to Bainbridge Island, letting the wind whip through my hair, watching gulls circle and dive. It was quiet freedom, the kind I'd always given to others but rarely claimed for myself. I built new friendships in small, steady ways. At the book club, Janice became a constant. She'd invite me for coffee or drag me to pop-up art shows, insisting I see the beauty in the unexpected. We talked about everything but the past favorite stories, silly gossip, plans for summer. Hikes. One night, we watched a thunderstorm roll across the water, lightning flashing silent and silver. "You ever think you'll let her back in?" Janice asked softly, not looking at me. I sat with the question, turning it over in my mind like a stone in my pocket. "I don't know," I said finally. "Maybe, but only if she learns how to love without keeping score, work her easier as well." The team trusted me. Meredith sent a quick note every so often, telling me how things were running more smoothly now that I'd left, almost like my absence gave the space for something new to grow. It didn't sting, I felt proud. I had given what I could, and now I was learning the value of holding something back for myself that one bright Sunday. I baked a tiny lasagna just for me with extra basil and mozzarella, no ricotta, the way I always liked but rarely admitted. I set the dish on the windowsill to cool, watching sunlight glint off the melted cheese, and smiled. It wasn't the meal that made me happy. It was the quiet knowledge that I could feed myself body and soul, without anyone else at the table. I sat down with my journal and wrote a letter I'd never send. Not to Amelia or Helen or Ryan, but to the woman I was when all of this began. I told her she did her best. That giving wasn't weakness and loving wasn't a mistake, but it was okay to stop when giving only emptied you out. I wrote about how brave it was to let go, how much peace there was in not answering every call and letting silence be the last word. That evening, as the city lights flickered on, I looked around my little apartment at the shelves filled with books and the chair by the window where I read every morning, and I felt grateful. Not for what I bossed, but for what I gained myself, my boundaries, the possibility of gentle days and genuine laughter. I thought of Amelia somewhere out there, maybe struggling to find herself, maybe still angry, maybe starting to understand. I hoped she would heal in her own way, that one day she would look at her own reflection and see more than disappointment. But I knew that wasn't my work to do anymore. The word mother still lived inside me, but it wasn't heavy now. It wasn't a chain. It was a quiet, steady ember, something I carried for myself. Proof that love could survive even after trust was broken. As I turned out the lights and settled into bed, I watched the city breathing in the dark, all those windows glowing with lives I never know. I let go of one last, lingering hope that anyone would come knocking, asking me to rescue them again. Instead, I wrapped myself in my own quiet company, feeling whole. Some people will love you only as long as you say yes. That's not love, that's their leverage. I'd finally learned to say no, and in doing so, discovered a life that was finally beautifully mine, and in that silence, I realized I didn't miss the sound of their voices at all. I missed nothing but the possibility of peace, and for the first time in my life, I had it.